Good question.
How are you? Oh, it's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So good evening. Let's see, this is the MSAD11 Policy Committee meeting for May 1st, 2025. We have the agenda that's been sent forward with actually this one policy for review. And I think that policy should have been sent out to committee members in sort of recently. Yeah, it was Tuesday. And we knew the policy was coming together. It's JICJ, knew that was coming together based on work in the cell phone use committee. So thank you for that, Angela. And so actually, if we can go through and do a quick round of introductions for committee members and then other board members and then administrative staff. And actually, let's see, I'll start. Sean, yeah.
Michelle talked about I'm not a
Oh.
committee member.
Thank you.
Joanne O'Brien, not a committee member.
Megan Carlson.
Yeah, Tony V, Chair.
Janelle McKinnon. Pat Hopkins, Superintendent.
So, so we have our agenda. We have our one policy to review, and let's see. Pat, I guess would you describe the genesis of this?
Sure. Last summer, maybe it was fall, the school board voted to create an ad hoc committee on cell phone usage. So a committee was created that included members of the administration, of the staff, parents, to really look at the use of cell phones in the classroom and in the building. So they've been working throughout the course of the school year, trying to develop a policy to determine what their recommendations were going to be moving forward. They surveyed parents, they surveyed students. Oh, our student reps also served on that committee. And so what you see tonight is the end product as a result of all of their meetings, the research that they did. And this is the document that they're putting forward. We have Sarah Sims and Angela Hardy who are here tonight. They were members of the committee. Due to some personal needs that I had to miss a few meetings. So I asked them to be here, since they were at every single meeting and could do a better job of capturing the conversation, and the genesis for some of the creation here of this particular policy, so.
Great, thank you.
So the policy overall, I guess I would say, just so it's clear to everyone in the public, so policy overall is not a complete ban on cell phones in the school system. It's more of a restriction on cell phones in the classroom, unless there's an academic component that is approved in advance by building administrators and requested by classroom teachers. And then there are areas throughout the building in which, or zones, I guess they're called, right? In which there may be permitted use, and the policy really identifies what permitted use is allowed in those particular zones.
Yeah, I saw that red, yellow, green or. green,
Correct,
red,
yeah. Yep, and it also includes the consequences, should there be any, so. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at this in advance of tonight, and I don't know, Angela, Sarah, if there's anything that you would like to add or contribute to the conversation?
Policy really addresses grades 6 through 12, pre-K to 5. We continued in our handbooks to have a no cell phone use procedure, and that is reflected in this policy. So we continue to, those zones are not for elementary age. And it says at the beginning, but just because we're also recording this, wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thank you.
That was clearly evident.
I think it's also important to note that one of the things that we really wanted, right now, the middle school has sort of the same policy as elementary. No cell phones, they should be off and away. And I can tell you that is not working. And so a lot of our conversation really centered around how do we teach them appropriate ways to use their cell phones, right? We as adults, we have cell phones. We know when to check them between meetings, and you know what I mean? And be respectful about that, but our students at that age really could use some more guidance. And so the thought was, if we had something comprehensive for the whole secondary, we would be identifying ways to teach them appropriate times, and we wouldn't be saying you can't ever look at it. It's yes, there's a time to look at it, here it is, and here's some boundaries with that.
Great, thank you for the work, and thank you for being here to kind of walk us through what's going on with this and the work that the committee has put in. Anything, just before we dive in on this, and actually just want to double check, do all committee members have a copy of this? Yeah, you've got, yeah, great. And you've got a copy, yeah, awesome. Anything that, I don't know, came up during those committee meetings, either thoughts or challenges or successes? I mean, it sounds like this maps closely with our pre-K to 5 version already and expands on that a bit. Anything else?
Well, we started off thinking
Full ban.
Yeah, a lot of us have
truly.
been reading The Anxious Generation and also experiencing inappropriate cell phone use, just our students trying to access their phones when there wasn't designated time to do so, because there was no designated time to do so. But so we went in with that kind of many of the members probably went in with that preconceived notion, maybe not the students. And then we did opt to conduct a survey And we separated the stakeholder groups, so staff, families, and secondary students. So those are the 3 different groups we surveyed. And those results kind of came back as we probably expected. Staff were very much in favor of a ban, not entirely, but very much. Students were very much not in favor of a ban, but did have some constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And
Thoughtful.
families were about 50-50. A few outliers feeling very, very strongly one way or the other, and then the majority of the others really half wanting one and half not wanting one. Also constructive feedback. A lot of that really shifted the collective thinking of the group from a full ban to maybe there's another way to do this. And so then we went and looked at lots of other school systems, not just nationally, but right here in Maine. What are they doing? What's working? How do they know? What are their policies and what do their procedures look like? And that helped sort of guide the committee's thinking about where we might land and what the details might look like.
And so, yeah, this sounds like this represents sort of a synthesis of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
Since I haven't seen the policy, where are the cell phones during class time?
So the idea is that we would buy, I guess if you think of like the old calculator pouches, they're kind of like that in regards. But there would be a designated place. Some of those would be different based on building layers, right? In each classroom. So the idea would be that they would come in, they would put them there in a secure place, and they would pick them back up on their way out. But that way they're not in their pockets buzzing. Oh, that must be, is that a Snapchat or whatever it might be? Oh, mom's telling me, grandma's picking me up, whatever. But then they would be able to pick it up and look at those things in between so that their instruction would truly be focused and they wouldn't be looking at that. Some of the research, we read several research articles to really kick off the committee. And many of them talked about how just one text message really can interrupt almost 5 minutes of their thought process, right? They lose focus, they get off track, they have to try to come back and don't realize what they've missed. And so you think about that. I know in my school, some of my staff did some informal data where the kids turned their phones on and every time it dinged, they actually tallied, and in one block, they had over 80 interruptions from a whole class. That's a lot of missed instructional time, right, for those students. And so the idea is that if we had a designated place where it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but they know they have access to it again, then at the end, then we have sort of a structure in place for that is forward, but is not fully restrictive.
However, if they ask to sign out, like at the high school, they have Smart Pass sign out for going to the bathroom, or in the middle school, I'm sure they raise their hand and ask their teacher. They're not to grab their phone on the way to the bathroom.
Right.
That's part of having it there. It's like it's for when the class period ends, either 80 minutes or 55 minutes later.
So what if they wear like a smartwatch, if they have an Apple Watch, or they just not wearing those at all?
Yep, it's included. They would do the same thing. They would
Put it
tuck it
in
in,
the-
yep, and then pick it up.
Yeah, and we were thinking like procedurally, we'll have to work a couple of things out, but the pouches would probably be numbered. Kids get a designated number for their period and they put it in their number, right? So that they know right where it is and it's their little spot and they only grab from their spot. And it's a place where the teacher can visibly monitor it.
I was gonna say, shoe holders are deep enough that you could probably put a phone and a watch in, because I think calculator pouches might be a little bit too small.
But that's
for some.
another, like I said, that's just kind of what it looks like.
Yeah,
What we were
yeah.
really thinking was kind of, I was like, oh, it's kind of like those calculators, but that's a great one. Yeah, it's that idea.
Any thoughts about if a phone either gets misplaced or someone grabs the wrong pocket or whatever?
There was some discussion about that. Phones are so identifiable nowadays, sparkly cases, stickers. I think it would be fairly easy to sort of track, because if it went missing in one block, you have a very specific pool of students, right? That were in that room. And again, we want to make sure that at the school level, we have a very clear pathway of how that's being monitored when they're getting them. All right, 1 through 5, come up and get your stuff. You know what I mean? 6 through 10 now, come up and grab your stuff if you have anything. So I think that are some procedural things at the school level that we're doing in order to address that. Because that could be a concern.
Yeah,
Classroom management practices.
right, that very on the ground kind of
Yeah, we
implementation.
didn't want to put it in policy.
Right.
We'll figure it out
Yeah.
at that level. Yep, yeah. So, yeah, I guess if we can, as we go through it, I mean, I think the language looked good to me. The rationale for it, made sense to me. It looks like earbuds, headphones don't have to be like deposited somewhere else. They just have to be out of reach, out of sight. Is that,
Yes.
yeah.
Unless, of course, there's always like, if there's someone has a medical exception, it's documented in an IEP or a 504.
Which we put in the policy specifically because we do have kiddos who need to monitor blood glucose, things like that.
Then it's very specified and it's included in here.
Yeah, so that would be, yeah, part of whenever that IEP comes up for 504. So,
I have a question. And I hate to bring it up, but I want to. You know, we do live in a world that's unsafe. And we do have instances of school shootings and things like that, and children get their phones and are able to call their parents, let them know what happens. Is there a protocol if something happens? I'm sure that there's already protocols in the classroom, you know, for active shooters or anything like that. I know those exist. Is that part also written into this cell
Part
phone?
of why we didn't do a full ban. That
Right.
was some of the family's concern.
Those were some of the family's concerns. So the phones would still be in the room with
Right,
them, right? And I am one of the district's ALICE trainers in regards to safety. So I train all of our new staff and I do refreshers. And we tell our kids, the first thing you need to be really worried about is your safety and enacting protocols, right? And so if we're in the bathroom, you shouldn't be worried about going to get your phone. You need to be getting yourself, you know, and going through that series. If they're in the classroom, the phones are there. I know we did read an article about like law enforcement. If everybody in the school picks up their phone and calls at the same time, it could actually jam the emergency services as well and some of that. So that's not our main focus, but it is there. There's access. Also, every classroom in the buildings have a phone. So there's still a regular phone, right? But they would be there.
And in an emergency, in terms of, since people brought up safety of the cell phones, not just safety of the person. Say it's a fire drill and they're going out the door.
Right.
They don't know if it's a fire drill or not, right? The class leaves, that door shuts and locks immediately.
Okay.
And no one's back in that room until the building's cleared. And then they come back in the room, unless it's a professional who's not there to be looking at phones. And then they go back into their room, the teacher unlocks the door, they enter. Maybe they're ready to transition from classes, so they just grab their, their particular device and their bag and whatever else they left there in the emergency, and they go to their next class. So in terms of safety of device that way, in terms of prioritizing student safety first, that's always, and then part of the reason we didn't end up in a full-on ban, nothing available, is because some of the survey results were, what happens if there's an emergency and I need to get a hold of my kid? That type of emergency. And if it's a family emergency, they should call the school right away, right? The school phone, and say, we're having, something's going on at home. I really need I need to dismiss my kid. I need to come pick them up.
Or I need to
that's
speak to them. Could you call them to the
Yeah,
office for me?
yeah, it's another
And we
thing.
added that in the policy as well, so that it was very clear for our families what access there was beyond student cell phones.
Plus, then there's an adult who's aware and can support the child, right? Rather than just a child getting a text message and panicking and none of the adults around them have any idea why. Right.
Thank you for answering my question.
I was also gonna say that in New Jersey, we had lockdown drills probably once a month. And one of the things that we said is we don't want you on the cell phones, because if there is an active shooter, they can hear you. Even texting, if everybody's texting, it comes out into the hallway. So it's just one of those things where you just don't want them doing anything until it's under control. And, you know, I'm sure one of the things is that it has to be on silent mode when it goes into the pocket. Okay.
Yeah, silent or off, either one.
And it looks like some of the process or the the zones, right? Would be like the yellow zone, like students could have that between transitions, hallway transitions between classes. And assigned lunch periods and that kind of thing. So it sounds like they'd return to having access periodically
Correct.
and outside of academic settings.
Yes.
Although the bathroom is the red zone, right? We don't want them in.
We don't need people on their phone in the bathroom. We need to make sure that's a very private space, you know, so that's just a red zone.
That just, yeah.
And that's common practice. We read like we've
Yeah.
got policies everywhere, and that's a common expectation. It might even be.
And then it looks like, yeah, it's kind of built into the policy, or as the committee has come up with, that it'll be shared with students at the start of each semester, trimester, added to the handbooks, if approved. The compliance there will be monitored, and then the policy will be reviewed to assure effectiveness and relevance. And I imagine that's there to like see, yeah, is it working? Is it doing what we need
Right,
to
we
do?
would love to definitely look at our data at the end of the first year and see what it looks like, and I'm sure there'll be a learning experience, right? Anytime you do something new, we are sure there will be things that we learn along the way. Our students will learn ways around as well, I'm sure, because they're very clever. They're in a good way, but yes, they are very clever, but yes.
Well, and you as the policy committee could request that this policy be brought forth like next March. So the buildings would have had a few months to implement the policy, see how it works. And if it's here in March, that would give the board the opportunity to make changes to the policy if you wish, and have those policies go through the approval process in time for the start of a new school year.
One piece of this, I do think, I don't think you're on this, but I think there should still be a opt-in or an opt-out option for parents. Because and I understand what you're saying, where it's like if they really need to get a hold of their kids, they can go to the school. But I think that there's some parents that could definitely have pretty strong cause about this. I mean, as you were saying, you even had some parents that you polled who felt extremely strongly about this. So I think that should still be a option in the policy.
Can you talk about what you mean? Like, what part's optional? Kids having cell phones during class periods?
Well, having the access, I mean, like granted, it's like if it's the parent has to actually, go and sign some sort of like permission or something like that for their kids to have that. Then, you would have to have some sort of more understanding of like the kids, the child's responsibility levels.
So if a child's 11 and you have 18 to 23 students in your classroom and you change every 55 minutes, I as a teacher now have to know that these 6 students get to have their cell phones out and up during class time. But these other 12 students don't. During class time, when they're learning. So it's just I'm not sure, I don't think we should have a policy if we wanna do it that way.
I don't understand how you opt out of a policy in the first place. If it's a policy, then it's a policy, so you can't have nobody can opt out of it. It's our policy for all of the land in the district.
I'm not trying to be rude, I realize now, I'm like, oh, that probably came across rude. I'm like trying to think logistically as like the teacher in the classroom, how do I actually functionally manage that, right? It's different with adults in a room in a meeting, so that's what I was thinking, like, how would I do that? And if we're having a policy because we have a problem, then I'm not sure the policy therefore won't solve the problem, if there's that feature, that's all.
I mean, do you think that there would be a plethora of parents that'd be doing that? I mean, they would allow their kids to have 24 access to their phones, or would it be just kind of dissuading those select people that have those harsh feelings about this?
takes one, it just takes one. It just takes one.
Right, yeah, go ahead.
So-
I have a question to go off of that, so, so I think that, you know, that parental ability to determine what their child does is important. However, I guess how you spoke about children having phones in the classroom because of their IEPs, such as, you know, for diabetes, for the monitors that go to the phone, et cetera, et cetera. How are you going to police that in the room? And
I think we're talking volume. I mean, for example, out of like the 450 students at the middle school, we're talking 3 students
Okay.
total,
And-
right? And that's just as a perspective,
Medical IEP,
percentage wise.
yeah.
And it is very specific and it is exactly what they are allowed to use it for. And those 3 kids actually are kids who don't even abuse the phone privilege.
Right.
Even though they have this unlimited access. So again, I think that's part of why in this policy, we're hoping that by giving them some of the responsibility to use their phone at certain times, we actually are showing them that we are invested in the fact that we trust that they can do this. They can still focus on their academics while still giving them that piece they're craving, which is being able to connect or look at the messages and things like that.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You go first.
I just wanted to also say, generally speaking, if a parent needed to contact their child because there was an emergency, a death in the family or whatever, they would call the school and the school would call right up to the teacher
Yep.
and send the child down,
Yep,
right?
and could call the teacher and say, I need you to give the student their phone and send them to the office, right? Like there's easy ways to do that if there's an emergency.
What we're trying to cut down on is calling the student, you forgot your lunch or you forgot your whatever, or.
And even students going into the, for example, like we have this a lot right now at the middle school, students bypassing the nurse, going to the bathroom and texting their parents to come get them saying, I don't feel good. And the parents just showing up and saying, oh, my student texted me from the bathroom. I mean, the policies are supposed to be off and away, right? And so we're struggling with these things. And we have a nurse who, now we have a child who was in the building sick who didn't even have the chance to try to offer support, or was it something simple? And we're, as you know, we have attendance policies and things like that. Dropout prevention is working really hard across the district, you know what I mean, to try to make sure kids are in buildings. And right now we're seeing cell phones are also giving some of the opposite effect there. They're giving kids this access to leave without other adults helping sort of guide that and going, I get it, what's really going on? Oh, you have a math test. Okay, let's process through and let's help you build some skills and tools in your toolbox on how to deal with that anxiety level rather than the avoidance.
One more question. So, I do understand, I am diabetic, I do have to monitor. I'm wondering, so I definitely hear what you're saying, the distraction, and I mean, I'm an adult and I get distracted by this, right? Would it be feasible, allowable under law? I'm not really sure. I personally have a separate device for my own blood sugar. Would it be feasible for the school to encourage those parents to get those separate devices so that even if they have the medical issues, they have a separate device to alert them that wouldn't be the phone, so that it levels the playing field in the classroom at just tonight?
And I mean, the phone access to diabetes varies, right? At the elementary level, when it's an early onset and they're having it, it's going, we talked about it when the nurse conversation was up, right, during the full board meeting. It's going to the nurse, it's going to the parent, and like when the device is acting up, it's going to the nurse, it's going to the parent, it's going to the teacher. The child doesn't typically have a phone, right? And so as a child ages and they're learning to self-monitor, there may be something that's accessed on their phone too, but someone else is also probably still having access.
Our nurse also has access, yeah.
Yeah, and so those children, they may technically in their IEP have it, But more than likely, those children, it's not sitting out like this. You know, I mean, plus a lot of times, at that age, they're starting to get to know, it's how they're feeling, what it is, what's happening. When they're in 3rd and 4th grade, they don't really know, which is why so many other adults are around that. But there's always like that one exception, and so for that medical purpose, but again, what we're trying to do is, as the beginning of the policy suggests, improve the academic focus, help students build stamina in focusing on one thing for one period of time, remain in the present moment, focused on the task at hand. These are all transferable skills to our adult lives, working. You know, and we still have all these other mechanisms that we have had well before cell phones about how to make sure families have direct access to their children during the school day while their children are at their job, which is school. And so we made sure, we went from a complete ban with phones in locked pouches for 12 hours, that don't unlock until the school day ends. We went from that, which we're not doing, but other schools are, to a much more responsive policy, responsive to families. I mean, they were one of the major stakeholders that said like, okay, if you do a ban, this is, you know, we looked at the data and we said, what did you say? You know, I don't want a ban, or my kid has a right to access their cell phone. Okay, so, but they often added paragraphs of information. So we're able to claim through that to say, okay, what's reasonable? And how do we make sure our children learn? Because it's also something that's your job, is to monitor our academic achievement and growth. It's really hard to learn when you're looking at this every 5 minutes. You cannot stay on task and focus and manage your own self and learn new information if you're distracted. And it's our job in schools to have students learn, so we're trying to create conditions where the phones are not a distraction. The research continues to express that. Entire states are continuing to build policies. In fact, this could be a moot point because there's legislation right now being reviewed, multiple bills about banning cell phones in public schools all over the state. I don't know if they're passed or not, but because people are aware of the challenges that we're having in staying focused in learning. And this is more fun than learning your fractions and algebraic equations.
Just one last thing. Thank you for looking at such a wide breadth of research. Thank you I can tell you all have worked very hard at this, so thank you. And thank you for answering my questions. I really appreciate that, so.
And I just want to maybe sum up a little bit, and Sean, I hear you, I think, on the you know, the access piece. I think, yeah, the practice of that would be like if, yeah, some kids have it out, that wouldn't work at all, so that would have to be removed. But I'm really seeing this actually as that sort of compromise, that students don't surrender it for the day, which was the original thought, and is one sort of version, that they surrender it just within the classroom, and then again have that access between classes, lunchtime, and
Correct, which is more than right now, like the middle school doesn't have that, so that's actually giving them an accountability layer and giving them more access to their phone than they're supposed to have at the moment.
But in structured
Correct.
ways where we learn how to manage ourselves and know that we can wait a period till we have access to it.
it also makes me think of some, just obviously as adults, we, you know, try to be mindful of how we interact with our phones during, you know, professional or what other events. But also I know that there are some settings where people can't have those if they're working on a roof. Like adults have to also very intentionally put them in a safe place so that we don't respond. I like that this has that educational element, imagine, right, that students learn, you know, where and when to time that so that, yep, I can use this at the right time. And then it does reinforce kind of our structure for adults in the building knowing what's going on with kids, so that if they're not feeling well, if they're sick in the bathroom, they would go to the nurse, who would then call home if someone's, ill or whatever the issue is. That we would want to support that communication so adults in the building know, and it's not just, a sudden departure of the child, without a clear process, because schools are responsible for kids in those times. So, and thank you, to echo that, thank you for the work for the committee in generating this. I think this is worth looking at. I think it sounds like we're responding to issues we're seeing in our buildings, our schools. I know you've looked at other districts and other schools to see what's working, and there's a range, it sounds like. Definitely it's happening in our classrooms. 80 pings in an hour or whatever is whatever that fraction is. I could do it, but that's a lot, right? It's more than one a minute, right? So that makes sense to me to move ahead and see how this would work. I imagine, well, it sounds like the students were, can you talk about the students for a second? They were mostly opposed, but they did.
They were opposed to a ban.
Opposed to a ban.
Yep.
There was some support or some thought around this,
Even in the broad student data, not just the student rep data.
Yeah, a lot of it was interesting, they actually identified a lot of reasons why they're looking at their phone. At the middle school level, interestingly enough, it was to tell time. And so we've actually purchased digital clocks to go next to our analog clocks to
The
help
analog.
with that.
And we'll continue
And
to
we'll-
teach
and
time
continue,
telling
right.
in the
And
elementary school.
it was, but they were actually very insightful. They were like, yeah, I mean, I learned, they're like, but all I do is look at my phone for the time, so I don't practice anymore, right? So like, it's not like I can't, it's just easier to look at my phone. But they were really insightful, and they actually said, in the data, that they understood they shouldn't be using it during instructional times. But the buzz that they feel in their pocket, the pull is just too powerful, right? Like, I have to know what somebody just posted on this. I have to know what this is, and I basically identify without saying the words that they do not know how to regulate that. That it is not the distraction.
And it's not like all text messages, right? They have notifications set up for every app they have on their
Every
phone.
app they
So, boom, boom, it's constant all the time, and that was not too different from high school. Also, it's just drama. And our student reps talked about that a little bit too, like, that is a little more text messaging. And then it spirals, and then they're in class, and then they can't manage it because they're getting emotional about something, and they're totally distracted, and then they want to go to the bathroom to go talk to a friend and work something out. And so there was a fair amount that was, they were clear they didn't want to ban. But they were also saying like, well, I'm not really supposed to have it out in class anyway. So if there was some middle ground, it would be fine. I mean, that's a summary of it. We could pull out the actual student words, but those two student representatives appreciated this version more than the concept of a ban. They thought this was like reasonable.
Yeah, they felt that this was a reasonable ask.
And they've been pretty good about going back to the student body and kind of asking around.
All right, let's see, anybody else? Sean, what are you thinking?
I'm fine with putting it on to the rest of the board.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so let's see if I could get a motion. We just did kind of the straw poll there. If I could get a motion to move this for a first read.
Motion for a first read.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. So much.
And I think that we will adjourn the meeting at this point. the policy committee meeting. So thanks for that. We do have warrants to sign separately.
The R1s.
There are warrants.
If people want to touch base with Andrea,
Yeah.
yeah, so you have a little time before the 6:30
Yeah,
meeting.
would we be signing those upstairs or will she bring them?
Andrea's right out there, so I'm not sure. You do not have as many to sign as you have in years past because now they allow you to photocopy.
That's exciting.
That is exciting because you had to sign what, 100 documents last year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it earlier today.